This is my brand new concrete benchtop, and I think it might be the best thing that I've ever made. If I can, you can. Let me show you how to make one. It all starts with cutting a mold out of melamine to the size of the slab you want. The two main things to consider here are thickness and overhang. In my case, I went with 45mm thick and an overhang on the front of 30mm. These were numbers that I decided on from my own research, so as someone with little to no experience with concrete, I felt safest using someone else's experience. I'm sure you could go thinner if you wanted, but the mix would need something like fiberglass added. I then measured the inside length of the mold, which would be the total length of the countertop, and lined up all the strips I cut earlier. I clamped these down and screwed them to the base, making sure to pre-drill each hole because you don't want the melamine to expand from the screw. Also make sure to countersink the holes, this will make sense later. Taping the screw holes makes sure that if any concrete ends up in there, and it will, you don't have the problem of getting it out of the screws later. Then it came time for caulking. I'm terrible with silicone, but the method I find works best is to use soapy water and a lot of rags. This will be the round over on the top, so find an object that reflects the edge you want. In my case, I used a pen. You also want to make sure that where the silicone meets the melamine, there's a feathered edge. You cannot believe how precise the concrete shows absolutely every lump and bump. Rubbing the surface down with olive oil helps to release the concrete from the mold later. To add some color to the concrete, I used oxide powder. I made a bit of a mistake here though. I decided to mix my concrete in 2 batches, so I mixed the powder into 2 halves. I should have done this by weight. I ended up with 2 different shades of grey from each batch, but I'll show you how I fixed that later. Then it was finally time to mix the concrete. I used a high strength mix from my local hardware store. All the videos I've watched either use Quickcrete, which I don't think we have here in Australia, or it's just not mentioned. I get the feeling that any concrete besides Quickset would work just fine. One thing that is really important with the concrete is to mix it as dry as possible. Using excess water reduces its strength. Before adding the oxide powder, I mixed it with water. This made it mix much better into the concrete. But be very careful using this stuff. It stains absolutely everything it touches. You really want to force that first layer into the corners. Because you've mixed it dry, it's not going to run as much as you think. Then after the first layer, I vibrated using a rubber mallet. Here you can see the difference in color between the layers, but to get around the problem, I just mixed it all in together. This actually created a really nice detail, so it all worked out okay. Now it was time to add the rebar. I wish I had used a sheet of mesh here, it would have made things so much easier. I also researched how concrete uses rebar as strength, and this helped to explain where it should be placed in the concrete. I'll leave a link in the description to a very good video that explains this. Then I vibrated for about an hour. You can use all kinds of methods for this, but I found using the rubber mallet worked okay. Just make sure you tap the entire form. As you hit the form, you'll see bubbles rise to the surface and then pop. As it pops, the hole fills with concrete. This is what you're after. Once this stops happening, you're done vibrating. In my case, I didn't really need to screed because I calculated the volume of the mold and used the exact amount of concrete. The other reason you would screed the bottom is so the underneath of the countertop is smooth, but really, no one's looking at the bottom. I then covered the concrete in plastic to keep the moisture in and the humidity high. Make sure to keep the concrete moist for about 4 days. You don't need to cure it any longer than that. Do a bit of reading up on curing if you're unsure. It's actually really interesting stuff. I then removed the mold. As you can see, the melamine came away really easily, so either the olive oil trick is on point or melamine is just unstickable. I found that once I'd broken the water seal underneath using a metal spatula, I was able to move the top. At 120 kilograms, it wasn't light, but there was also a suction holding it down, which made it even heavier. Then a friend came around, and after a lot of discussion, we flipped it over. Don't be a hero, get someone to help you out. I wet sanded using a sanding block, but if I'm honest, it didn't really do that much. The melamine does all the shaping for you, so you could probably miss this step. I just wanted to knock down any sharp corners and get rid of any debris. I let the concrete dry for the next 4 days. Before sealing, you need it to be properly dry, and to test this, you take a piece of rubber and place it on top. If there's a wet spot underneath after 2 hours, it needs to dry for longer. I used 6 coats of water-based sealer, starting the first coat at 25% strength, then moving up to 100% on the last 2 coats. Then the countertop was finished and needed to be installed. At 120 kilograms, it was just easier to move it on the form and then slide it onto the cabinet frame. If you've got any questions about the steps involved, feel free to leave a comment below or even contact me directly.
Ready? Yep, go. Thank goodness there was space for fingers there. That just dropped like a rock.
So that's how you make a concrete countertop. I was really impressed with how this came out, and considering how little work I actually put into it, the results are crazy. I guess at the end of the day, it's the concrete that's doing all the work, So you just need to sit back and wait and let the magic happen. I did a lot of research before getting started on this, and I think that definitely helps a lot. Over on Mr. Fix's channel, Aaron Massey goes through a very thorough step-by-step process on how to get a concrete top like this. And Mike Montgomery from Modern Builds has a slightly different take on it, but he still comes out with a great looking concrete top. So with that said, I definitely recommend going and checking out those videos, and take your time, really understand the process from start to finish, and it will stand you in good stead when you eventually pour that first bit of concrete and it has to happen. So that's how you make a concrete countertop. If I can, you can. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click that thumbs up. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys soon.